Welcome, everybody. I'm Richard Dennis, one of the directors of the Infrastructure Access Managers, also Chief Economist at the Australia Institute. And I think I know most of you wearing one or both of those hats, but if this is the first time you've come to one of our webinars, thank you very much. I'm coming to you today from Canberra, and I acknowledge the Ngunnawal people on whose land that I sit. This webinar series is designed to get people, often mainly investors and philanthropists, thinking about all sorts of things in relation to strategies around diversification and climate change and all sorts of things. But the sort of thrust of our strategy in both setting up infrastructure access managers, which I'll talk about in a second. Oh, I'm just getting a message. Maybe something's wrong. Hold on. Oh no, good. I thought I wasn't coming through loud and clear, but I am. Is we want to encourage people to put their mouths where their money is, or if not, we as a fund manager like to put our mouth where our investors' money is, because we really think that we need to change the national debate about so many things. So it's really exciting today to have this conversation, which, as I'm sure you all know, revolves around the role that philanthropy recently played quite decisively, I think, in shaping Mark Vail's decision to step down as Chancellor of the University of Newcastle. So I'll come to that in a minute, but just a little bit of housekeeping first. I'll introduce the panelists in a moment, and also I'd introduce on the call today, we've got John McKinnon, who's the Chair of Infrastructure Access Managers, Jonty Lowe, one of the other directors. But before we get started, John's got a little announcement to make about infrastructure access managers. So John, over to you.
Thank you, Richard, and hello everyone. Good morning to you all, and thanks for joining us. We have some exciting news to share with you. We have recently invited Dan Madovan and Amanda Goodman, who we've got to know quite well over the years, to work alongside the current directors of IM to help us grow our business, to build our set of products out, and to support our capital raising activities. Dan and Amanda, who I'm sure some of you also know, come with a lot of experience and a demonstrated track record in the impact investing space, and a very similar passion to what we have about driving positive change. So we're really excited to have that opportunity to work together. We believe there's never been a better opportunity to invest in unlisted infrastructure, or a better time. And in particular, that now is the time to invest in green infrastructure that is going to be the new world we will live in. There's investing for that low carbon future we all need. So it's the right time. It's exciting to have great people who share that passion, who have come to join us. So the stars really aligned in terms of Dan and Amanda being available at this time and to come on board and help us. So let me say, if you're interested in hearing about any of those current funds or the interesting pipeline of new things you might be doing, then please reach out to any one of us, including Dan and Amanda. So back to you, Richard.
All right, thanks, John, and yes, welcome Dan and welcome Amanda. It's it's great news for us, and we think great news for our investors and the strategy that we're trying to roll out. So a little bit of background. Actually, first let me start by saying we've got two people joining me today to talk about this. We've got Alan Schwartz, formerly the Chair of Philanthropy Australia, and we've got Sue McKinnon, John's partner, who's deeply involved in the AEGN and a very active philanthropist in all sorts of ways. I'll come to them in a minute, but they're going to be joining me in conversation to talk about what happened and the role that philanthropy played in the campaign up in Newcastle. But just a little bit of background about that for everybody, so we all have a shared knowledge base. So a couple of months ago, late May, Newcastle University appointed Mark Vail, former Deputy Prime Minister, former leader of the National Party, and currently the chair of Whitehaven Coal, the largest pure play coal company in the ASX. They appointed Mark Vail to be the Chancellor of Newcastle University. Now, I'm an alumni of Newcastle Uni. When I heard that, my heart sank. And I'll come back to that later on. But my first impression was, well, there's nothing we can do about this, but what a terrible decision. Why was it such a terrible decision? Well, to give you a taste of the role that Whitehaven play, Mike Vale is the chair of Whitehaven Coal. Whitehaven Coal are trying to expand a coal mine, Vickery coal mine in the Upper Hunter. And you might have heard there was a court case with 8 students and a nun seeking an injunction to stop the Vickery coal expansion going ahead. And of course, Whitehaven were defending the decision or their application to go ahead on the basis that they had no obligation, no duty to protect future generations. The court case in the federal court argued that the Environment Minister did have a duty to look after the interests of children in relation to climate change, and they subsequently won that court case in the sense that the federal court judge found that such a duty existed. But Mark Vale's company argued that it didn't. So here was a man who was literally arguing for the right, not just to build a new coal mine, but arguing against the idea that companies should have a duty to future generations, appointed as Chancellor of a very large regional university. Now, after that decision, as I said, I was shocked and appalled, but in some sense not entirely surprised. I didn't think much more would come of that until I read that Professor Jennifer Martin, who's with us today, and I'll come to Jennifer a little bit later. Jennifer Martin, one of a professor in the medical faculty up there, was on the council of the university, and she resigned from council, citing concerns about the process. And when she decided to step down, I was surprised, I was excited, but I was also challenged. I thought, well, okay, that's some real leadership there. If someone can make something, a decision that big, what can I do? So I decided to hand back my Alumni of the Year award, which they gave me for national leadership back in 2017. I took a selfie of myself holding the photo. I sent it to the Newcastle Herald, who ran a full-page story basically saying, you know, grumpy alumni hands back awards. My phone went into meltdown after that. I literally had more than 200 calls and text messages from people reaching out to say both good on you and what can I do? And some of them were philanthropists. So on that note, I just want to introduce Sue McKinnon again. She was one of the people that I spoke to after that. Yeah, Sue, what happened from your point of view? What made you interested in this, and why did you organise, you know, such an amazing letter?
Well, when you've spent so much of philanthropic funds on trying to shift Australia to do something more on climate change, on trying to end coal in Australia, we have contributed into Hunter region renewable programs to try and help the people there transition beyond coal, because as we know, it doesn't matter how much government support is offered to coal. But, you know, the coal industry in Australia, its future will be determined by decisions made in boardrooms overseas and buying desks overseas. So, you know, there's a real need for us to get our heads around that and transition. We've contributed to that. The court case you mentioned, Richard, I mean, I've been heavily involved in that since before it was a twinkle in Dave Barton's eye. And so this whole, you know, appointment of Mark Vale, it's like, oh my God, like, well, again, terrible decision. What can we do? We've contributed to a lot of organisations that are working hard against it and we're currently working against that. But to just see that happen and the prospect of what that would mean, you know, everything block on future things happening, future great things happening with the university. Again, I guess a little bit like you, Rich, was like, well, you know, it's a done deal. We can't do anything about it. And then to see, as you said, Professor Martin, and then yourself, and can I mention also Ross Knowles, also an alumni of Newcastle University. And we've known Ross ever since we joined the Australian Environmental Grant Makers Network. Great guy, and he's prepared to step up on his own there and say what a dreadful decision this is and be quoted and put his name to that. So, you know, then like, well, what can we do? Perhaps several of us could step up if one person gets their name in the paper by saying, this is a terrible decision, I don't support it, and I'm going to recommend that my future philanthropic, groups that I'm on don't give any money towards this. What it would look like if there was more of us that did that. So, you know, did touch base with Richard, discussed what would be the best way to do that. And then I guess you step into the public realm. Well, you know, you can write letters and send them in private and seek meetings, but people don't always want to have meetings after the fact and all the rest of it. What's the point? So why don't we go a little bit more public?
So do you mind if we just pop the ad up at the moment? Jonty, if
Absolutely.
that's possible, can you flash the ad up? And so just kind of tell us the thinking behind the ad. You know, what is it about it that you think was influential? We'll talk to Jennifer Martin a bit later, but there it is.
Okay, here. I think one of the things there you've got in the middle, the actions speak louder than words. So it's tapping into the fantastic plans and strategic outlook of Newcastle University, and then pointing out the inconsistencies between that. You've got the right there in that middle sort of lower section there, it's talking about that the court case there where the judge accepted and the government accepted that climate change and, you know, all the use of an extension of this mine was going to be catastrophic and have a catastrophic effect on all of us, including children. And then you've got Mark Vaile, who, as head of Whitehaven, said, I don't care, we're going to expand anyway and we're going to fight this. Giving a social license to someone like that to sit above the university, which is such a huge, important part of the Hunter region, is just terrible. And then you've got people's names at the bottom saying, you know, we're calling you out on this one and we make decisions with our money. I think one of the most important parts of the ad is saying, well, we can't actually tell you what to do, Newcastle University. We're not going to do that. We're just letting you know. We're giving some information here that we're not going to be giving money to the university if this is the sort of thing you're going to do. And yeah, getting that wording together, then ringing around people and saying, what do you think? This is what we've come up with. Would you be prepared to put your name on the bottom of that? And bless all the people who did.
Thanks, Sue. We'll come back to that in a minute in terms of the ringing around and sort of the logistics behind it. But now's probably a good time to throw to Alan Schwartz. Alan, you're obviously one of the signatories to the letter. From your point of view, getting asked to sign a letter like this, what goes through your mind?
Well, Richard, you know how it happened because you rang me and said, you told me the story and said, will you sign? And I said, of course I'll sign. And you said, well, why don't you think about it? I said, I already have.
You make it seem really easy. How come everyone doesn't sign that?
And I reflected on that and I thought, you know, I've really become very radicalised and I'm very, very pleased about that because I think that being a business person, you can do some good if you run your business well. Being a philanthropist, you can do more good. But I think that advocating for change about the way society works is the most powerful tool that we've got. And that's something I learned from John Daly when I took over as chair of Philanthropy Australia. I asked him for advice on what my priorities should be as the chair and what were the important things. And he told me, you know, the government spends about $300 billion a year on, you know, various things. And philanthropy is maybe $2 or $3 or $4 or $5 billion, depending on how you define it. He said the most important role for philanthropy is to influence how that $300 million is spent and how much that $300 billion is. And that really resonated with me. And in my term of president, I really spent a lot of time talking to our members about the importance for them of supporting, doing advocacy, but also supporting the advocacy of Philanthropy Australia itself. So the way we framed it is we said, you give money to a lot of good causes. We're a good cause. Give us money. You know, we created a philanthropy champions group that funded our policy and advocacy work, which enabled philanthropists to work, which enabled us to fight against the regulations that would have targeted not-for-profits that were so-called politically active, that whole initiative. And we were very successful on that. The power of that is incredible. And anyone who's listening to this, perhaps I could give a plug to a book I just read called Democracy in Chains by Nancy McLean, which is an extraordinary book about the Koch brothers and the power of influence that you can have by influencing thought leaders and influencing not-for-profits, by doing research and all of those sorts of things. So I've come to a point now where, yes, it's good to be, do your business as best as you can. It's good to be a philanthropist, but possibly the most important thing we can do is to be courageous and speak out. And I feel really, really very comfortable about that. As long as I feel that the cause is good, the people I'm dealing with I can trust, and I've developed obviously a great deal of respect and trust for Richard. And you did a great job, and congratulations. And I'm just so proud to have been involved with it and to have been invited to participate.
Oh, thank you, Alan. And I'll have to check that book out. And maybe we'll send an email around later with a few things for people to read. But I read a book a few years ago called Poison Tea, which was how the Koch brothers had created the Tea Party movement. And similarly, the incredible impact they had on US democracy. So, for good or ill, there's no doubt that philanthropy and money makes a difference in politics and policy. My one-liner is policy shifts billions and philanthropy shifts millions. So why not aim the millions at the billions? But certainly it's bumpy for people. So how about you? What are obviously on this particular one, you were there at the very beginning, but what, as a philanthropist generally, what are the qualms, what are the hesitations that you think through before you put yourself literally out there, sign something, attend something, put your mouth where your money is? What are the hesitations? What are the problems?
Well, I mean, there's always qualms about sticking your head above the parapet in, society that has tall poppy syndrome still alive and well. There's even more risks around doing it in a place which has a Murdoch media dominated area. I mean, I've sometimes said, well, I take my inspiration from Gina Reinhardt, who, invests her money in certain ways, donates her money towards organisations that, will reshape the world the way she wants, and is also prepared to, jump on the back of a truck with a megaphone. And the thing is, she gets criticised a lot for that as well. But it's not generally by, the majority of the press and television in Australia. So it's a different thing. Can I say it's a big part is doing it as part of a group and safety in numbers. Sticking your head above the parapet on your own is one thing. Doing it as part of a group, I think having the names there on both the ads that we ran as part of a group, people provided protection for one another. Some higher profile names, some lower profile names, just being together and having each other for support and I also think at this time as well, so I used to be a lot more worried about this. So partly the more you do it, the easier it is, the better you get at it. And also I just think the influence of some of those publications that do the pushback, it's waning. It's very predictable what's going to come out of the Australian. Who reads their shit little rag anyway? It just doesn't matter so much anymore. I think you can be more afraid of it before it happens, and then afterwards go, that was okay. And I did it with some great people. That was actually a lot of fun. Looking forward to doing some more.
And so what do you say to people that say, why should philanthropists have a louder voice than average? Who are you to speak out? Why does being a philanthropist give you privilege in this debate?
Well, we spend a lot of money that, we've got more than some other people giving it away to try and achieve good things. It doesn't cost anything to speak out. So, that's a free. I think Alan said something beforehand that encapsulated that really well, didn't you, Alan?
Yeah, Alan, what do you reckon? How come you've got a voice here? Is that fair?
Yeah, I sort of don't care whether it's fair, basically, because when you look at the other side of the political divide, and that's why I recommended that book. This has been a tool of trade for, if you like, the forces of evil for a long time. And why shouldn't the forces of good, as long as we have confidence in our judgment about what is good and we don't make that too broad? But to me, then I can't see any problem with it. You've got to fight fire with fire. When you think about tobacco and you think about gambling and you think about coal and oil and the amounts of money they spend to influence public opinion and the amount of effort they make in advocacy and speaking up, well, we've got to counter that with equivalent tactics because they have got massive leverage. If you think about, for example, climate, I think that the top oil companies have spent something like $200 million on advocacy in the last few years. And that is a huge amount of money and very, very, very powerful because it protects many hundreds of billions of dollars of profits of that sector. And I think that by spending a relatively small amount of money, you get enormous leverage. And that's what we've got to do. And I think that in principle, when you look at it in a purist way, a philanthropist should have no more say than anyone else. And who's to say what's right? But you know what? I don't care. I've worked out what I think is right. I'm just going to do it because I don't think there's almost nothing in the world that you can ultimately defend in the most deepest philosophical way. But for me, climate change and the importance of reducing carbon is so extreme that I will do things, including a sense of discomfort about what we did to Mark Vaile, because he's probably a perfectly decent human being, and I don't feel good about that. And that was, I don't know, but he might just be a perfectly good person, but I don't care because he's on the wrong side. And I think that's a really tough approach, but I think it's the only approach that I'm comfortable with. I'm not going to try to justify what I'm doing. I'm just going to do it. I've thought about it deeply. I worry about it a lot, and I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alan. And just to be clear, we'll put up, and in case anyone doesn't know, this does have a happy ending, and Mark Vaile did step down, and we'll put up the next ad that we put out shortly, the sort of congratulatory one. But I think you just raised a really important point, Alan, and I did speak to a lot of people over the course of this month, and a lot of people were sort of anxious about sort of not wanting to be personally critical of Mark Vaile. And if you read the text of the ad that Sue put up before carefully, there's no personal criticism on there of him. I did quite a number of interviews on local radio and with journalists. I always actually made it about the council and the university council's appointment of this person, saying that it was the council that had made a bad decision on behalf of the university. And indeed, when Mark Vaile resigned, actually, Jonty, why don't you pop up, while I'm speaking, why don't you pop up the next ad that appeared? When Mark Vaile resigned, I was on radio that afternoon and I congratulated him, I thanked him. And as a lot of people on this call will know, when that first ad ran with 16 names, it got front page news in the Newcastle Herald. It had coverage around the country. Importantly, no media outside of Newcastle had talked about the Mark Vaile issue until the Philanthropist ad came out. And that's when the Sydney Morning Herald cared, and that's when the Financial Review cared. Anyway, the first ad had 16 people, and Sue was working on getting 50 for the next one. But before the next ad, which had been booked, could run, Mark Vaile stepped down. So as you can see here, the ad went ahead, but a beautiful blue sky. I grew up in Newcastle. It's a spectacularly beautiful city. A good news story congratulating the community for speaking out. There was no sense of schadenfreude. There was no criticism of Mark Vaile as a person. And indeed, most of the criticism that was aired was of the council for making such a tin-eared decision. So, Sue, talk us through what a beautiful ad. Where'd you find the photo?
That's a very beautiful ad, isn't it? I'm not sure if if the people who sorted that one out for me want to talk about it, but they're pretty close in the middle of Newcastle, and I'll use the opportunity. Can I use the opportunity to talk about that first ad being putting out there and the attention that it attracted? Like, I thought, oh yeah, we've got this wording, yeah, we'll get a few people to sign it, we'll stick the ad in the paper, and people in Newcastle will notice that. Because as you said, up to that point, it was the other media who'd been approached about talking about were just like, nah, it's just a really parochial story. It's got nothing to do with the national stage. So, we'll put it in there. Well, we did. And then, of course, the people at the paper were really interested straight away on the phone, like, why are you doing this? Let's have a story about it, So we put the ad, it came on page 22 or something. This was the previous week. But the story about it was on the front page and followed up on page 7. And there was so much interest. Then I was on the radio the next day. That afternoon. That's right. And then it just kept on going all weekend. One thing that happened was that somebody got in contact with me, said, wow, I had no idea you were doing this. I'm so impressed. What can we do to help? Really like to help. Well, the students at the university had already been protesting where your current students were not happy with this. But there was another cohort of students which were already organised and had been talking, and they're future university students. And they are students who've organised the student strikes in Newcastle, and they're the children who were the litigants in the case, who, as I said, I've been involved with quite a while. And they were talking about, well, perhaps we could raise our voices as future students, and were, looking at, signing an open letter. But how could they, put that in the paper? So I suggested that perhaps we could have a go at raising some money around this. And the person who contacted me said, I'll pay for the ad. So on the Monday, I was actually busily connecting people, or, over the weekend, connecting people such as, talking to the people who'd organised done the layout for the first ad, connecting the students with them and their wording, talking to the paper about, would it be possible to run another ad? And there's somebody who's interested in paying for it, and just connecting them. They were really interested in that, want to talk to the students and all the rest of it. I think that did add to the pressure of the university.
So let me just add on there. So absolutely it did. And just so people have a sense of the timing, the first Philanthropist ad ran on a Friday. The student ad that Sue's talking about was going to run on a Tuesday.
And it did run. It was booked and paid for by, the middle of Monday.
Yeah.
So it was in there, and the journalist was talking to people about that.
But to be clear, Mark Bale stepped down on the Monday afternoon before the student ad even showed up. But and maybe Sue doesn't even know this, but I was talking to journalists quite a lot throughout this, and I let the journalists know that the student ads were coming, and the journalists rang the university to ask for comment about how did they feel that these students were taking it out. And I taught economics up there. I taught 1,000 students a year for 5 years. I lectured up there for a long time. I was getting a lot of feedback. And when they learned that the students who were taking out that ad, and that some of the students in it were students the university had previously used to champion itself, I know for a fact that it really sapped their will. So maybe now's a good time to introduce Professor Jennifer Martin, because she was not only the person that showed the leadership that started this campaign, and on behalf of myself, but everyone here, I think congratulations and thank you, Professor Martin. I know what a hard decision that was, but she's also obviously still up there working at the uni every day, and on the ground knows far more about what was going on than I did. So Professor Martin, if you're there, thank you again. And yeah, tell us a bit about why you stepped down, and what role, if any, you think the Philanthropist letter sort of played in putting pressure on the uni.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Rich. I'm just trying to see if I can get a picture up, but I don't know if you can see me from there, but
we can hear you, but I can't see you at the moment. Wouldn't be a Zoom call if we didn't have some sort of technical glitch. So,
yep, it's on now. Thank you.
oh, there you are.
Yeah, here I am. And please call me Jenny.
Hey,
and
Jenny.
hello to everyone. Thank you. I think you give me a lot more credit than what's due, actually, Richard. But yeah, thanks just so much for the invitation today to attend this meeting, and to everyone on this call for your support. It's actually really, really incredible. And in particular, the work that you did, Richard, also Sue and Alan. And look, as an All Black supporter, I was pretty chuffed to see the article by David Pocock. And I think that actually went down quite well. But look, and to be honest, I think I hadn't appreciated all the work that you're all doing out there, and I've become incredibly aware of that now. And I've sort of been embarrassed that as an educated person and a person who does actually care about the environment and does take action in my own little advocacy way, that I was just pretty much unaware of the bigger picture here. I have protested against the uni super investment in coal, and I did go on the surf protest against PEP 11. My kids are involved in the climate change strike. So I think in our own little way, we're doing just what I guess you would say Middle Australia is doing. But probably that's more just a general awareness rather than there's actually quite a specific movement going on, which I know now will be successful. Yeah, so I guess it's funny looking back, and it's nicer being at this point than where I was 4 weeks ago. But I suppose it's fair enough to say there are governance concerns, which I can't really comment on because of the code of conduct and the board and the, the codes around the board. But I think I felt initially that, and I guess it's not uncommon that you might see governance issues in the running of not-for-profits, and I have been quite vocal on that of late as well. But I think I felt that I could still make a difference as a staff representative with my lines of questioning and keeping it all honest and transparent and making sure we're accountable, reminding everyone of who we're actually answerable to, which includes the stakeholders, and that's quite a large group for University of Newcastle, but also the public purse, and of course the donors, which in our case in Newcastle has been predominantly coal, but certainly trying to keep that debate alive. And actually for a lot of, I think, people that have been involved in the university for a while, it's probably quite a new debate, trying to get the elevation of stakeholder voices to the board. Also making sure that we have an ESG, a discussion at each board meeting, all that sort of thing. But certainly that's where I thought I could really keep council honest and accountable. But I think having my name aligned to a unanimous statement, and then also being bound by a code of conduct, which meant that I was unable really to talk to the people who had voted me on the council as their representative as to the issues that happened. It basically muted me. And I realised then that that was really pushing a trigger for me, because I felt then that I couldn't then act within both my conscience, but also my duty as an elected rep and also as a member of the public of Newcastle. So I really knew what stakeholders would say about that. I had been hearing, not just through my kids, but my own community activities, what the community was expecting of a new chancellor, and those points I had actually, broadly raised myself as well. So I think that I knew exactly how this was going to look to the community, and it certainly wasn't aligned with our strategic plan, and it's certainly not with our future. So I admit it wasn't really a good space to be in, and it certainly wasn't an elegant thing to resign from a council, and I was aware that that was quite an uncommon thing. In fact, I'm not sure how often that's happened before. I think I was certainly aware it wasn't going to help me personally from a selfish perspective, and certainly not going to help my future in the university. But I had a duty. I was an elected person, but also as a member of the public and as a mum of 4 teenagers and their friends, for whom climate change is the biggest concern for all of them, not even having a house or a job. I think the weight of responsibility of all that meant that, however inelegant it was, I actually had no option. That this was really where the rubber hit the road. And then because I knew of the weight of what I was about to do, and what the fallout would be, I actually contacted a senior, very wise person, and within 2 seconds of raising it, I knew it was the right decision. So I basically sent the email. I hope that gives you some. In terms of, what was the other part of the question? Sorry, how am I going?
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, well, just, do you think that the philanthropists and other people speaking out helped, and how are things for you and the uni now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think all that stuff I've just said is really selfish. Like, it's quite, I'm talking to you from a selfish perspective, how it felt facing that reality and knowing that as a human, this is what I had to do. I think what I thought would happen is that probably my job would be terminated. There'd be all this behaviour going on, and then within a week it would all blown over. And I actually could not believe your bold statement, Richard, and they're giving the award back. And I think I just felt so buoyed by that actually people other than me really thought this was not a good thing and were prepared to take, as it said in your ad, actions rather than words. You actually were taking an action, as I had as well, and that felt really good. But the philanthropists, those ads were absolutely amazing. They're amazing because they basically hit the mark. I think from a public sector organisation, you need money, and we're obviously facing a lot of issues in the university sector around around money. So I think that sort of hit it where it hurt in that regard, but it raised the profile. And I think people in Newcastle had often said to me, "Oh, but you can't upset the coal industry because they fund everything in Newcastle." And this was a statement that said, well, that might have been the case in the past, but actually, if we're going to build something for the future, these are the people that are going to help Newcastle look forward. And actually, they're really not happy about this appointment. So I think it was that it was solidarity, I think, with the people that actually realised that that argument of continue to accept coal money and coal pressure might have been okay in the past, but the future was, our money needed to come from somewhere else. So I think that really helped. I think it really spurred I know it spurred the Doctors for Environment Australia into action, because I got a call from them, and I actually had never met anyone on that team, even though some of the doctors worked with me at the John Hunter. And they said, "Are these your colleagues?" And I said, "No, I haven't heard of these people, but that's a pretty amazing statement, isn't it?" And then they said they really wanted to do something, and that had given them confidence as well. So they started mobilising that network. The doctors themselves also noticed that and felt empowered. They've set up another group called Vote Earth Now, I think, but they've basically decided they were going to resign their voluntary teaching service from the university. They felt that if the philanthropists were making a statement, they really wanted to make a statement too, because they're interested in, more specifically, the health issues around climate change. So I think it really gave them that confidence to, basically they drafted a letter that said that they were all going to withdraw their service from the university as of the following week. And in a way, unfortunately, the Mark Vaile resigned before they had to do that, and they ended up writing a letter similar to yours, which is around the congratulations sort of tone, but they got fired up and they had meetings in Newcastle. I think there were 80 doctors at one meeting that said that if he came, they were going to withdraw their services, and they agreed with the philanthropists. And there's quite a few other groups that I think by then we're sort of getting organised. They wanted a future that was not coal. So I think that I've waffled on a bit, but essentially I think it gave a lot of groups the confidence that they weren't going to be alone, and that actually it reinforced for them that the future for Newcastle was not continuing to accept coal money, even though it did support some people's research currently. This was not going to be sustainable going forward. So I think all that, everything about that ad, the fact that it was a big group of you, I think also the way it was black and then light, and then the words around actions speak greater than words, I think that was done. It was absolutely brilliant and really, really timely. And I think I was even amazed that I was chuckling to myself thinking, oh, well, they thought they would just be able to sweep me under the carpet and it will go away, and look what's been unleashed. Yeah,
wonderful.
So it was great. So well done. And I am so grateful, because it also stopped me sort of being left out there. It really, but I think it really turned the city around.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And stay on the line if you can, because we'll go to questions in a minute. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some for you. So if everyone got questions, please type them in. We'll come to them shortly. But one other person I'd like to invite to speak first is Ross Knowles. Ross is the director of Ethinvest, and Ross was the first philanthropist to be out there loud and proud, quoted talking about this. Ross, if you're there, leaving aside our historic rivalry over the Alumni of the Year award, what motivated you to speak out?
Hi, Richard. Hi, everyone. Well, I suppose the motivation was that I thought the appointment was wrong. That's obviously the first step. And I suppose as a philanthropist, I've been funding advocacy for many years, and I think there's definitely room for philanthropists to take that next step and actually advocate themselves. So, whilst I hate being in the public glare, it was something that I was very happy to do. And congratulations to you, Richard, and to Sue, and of course to Jenny for getting the thing going in the first place. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you. And just like on that, like talking to the journalist, how did that feel for you, speaking to the journalist and then seeing it in the paper the next day? Was it scary? Was it nerve-wracking? Was it fun to get emails from old friends you hadn't heard from a while?
I always hate speaking in public. I don't enjoy it. It's not my personality. But I was thrilled to see the reaction. I was really very buoyed and very happy to see the effect that it was having. So I think it's you use whatever tools you have at your disposal. I totally agree with what Alan was saying earlier, that we can have a really big impact, I think, in advocating for the things that we believe in. And I sort of wonder whether we can't organise more in the future to be more proactive in this way. It's wonderful to see that in this case we were able to react to the situation so powerfully and quickly with all of your good work. But if we could in the future not so much be there to react, we need to do that, but also think about areas where we could be proactive. I'm not quite sure what that would involve or what it would look like at this stage, but I think there's definitely something that we could think about there.
Thank you, and thanks again, Ross. I know literally the first philanthropist out there quoted in the paper, I think was a very brave thing to be and incredibly helpful. Alan, can I just come back to, and again, if people have got questions, please type them into the Q&A thing and I'll put them to any of our panelists. Alan, hearing Jenny say what she did, how does that make you feel? I mean, obviously you didn't, and I know for a fact Alan didn't hesitate for a minute to sign up, but having signed up and hearing what Jenny just said, how does that make you feel?
Well, for me, it might have been, at worst, the mild discomfort of being criticised. Jenny was incredibly brave because it went to, the heart of your life and your income and everything else. So when I saw that, I was really quite moved by the courage. And, you understate the importance of what you do, because people like you make all the difference, because you get to see the passion. If someone's prepared to give away so much about an idea that's so broad and abstract, and we can't see it, and it won't be here for a long time, you've got to be able to intellectualize that and understand that there's a threat, and then be able to have so much love of humanity, if you like, that you're prepared to personally sacrifice yourself. I think that is incredible. And what I was going to add also was, I think that it should not only be philanthropists that should advocate, but when business people advocate, they're criticised as well. And I think that we've got to get over that. I think the business people should be willing to advocate, for example, for a price on carbon and not be criticised, because business people are people, and they also, and that's not philanthropic. So there's philanthropic where there's no return, but a business person, to me, for example, one of the investments we have made is with the infrastructure access fund with Richard, because we knew that although we were investing in some infrastructure that wasn't great in some ways, and Richard may elaborate on it, I knew I could rely on Richard to be an advocate for change in the airport and in the coal, in the etc. The various infrastructure assets that they did. And I think that if the infrastructure access fund is a fantastic example of a commercial enterprise that unashamedly advocates. And I think the more license we give to more people to advocate, which is a lot less than what you did, Jenny. Jenny, you put yourself on the line, but I think advocating, the worst that can happen, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling still, is to be criticised. No one likes being criticised and even made fun of, and those sorts of things that you're scared of. No one enjoys that, but that's something we've all got to be prepared to accept, and whether you're a business person or a philanthropist or a member of the community. So this is, for me, all relatively new insights, and Richard's been very helpful in helping me understand that. The importance of voice, because ultimately it's the social consensus that develops, and that comes through voice, through conversations, by persuading people, by creating emotional stories, by creating stories that resonate. So yours was a story, Jenny, that people looked at and said, oh my God, here's someone who cares so much, they're prepared to put their career on the line. So that cannot be underestimated, even though you think it's small. I think it's massive. And as I said, when I read it, I was quite moved.
Yeah, I agree entirely, Jenny. I think you're being very humble, as you always are. Hey, I've got a question here from Julie Taylor-Mills, who, Julie, I didn't know that you went to Newcastle Uni as well. We'll have to chat about that sometime. Julie asks, what was the cost for the ads? And that she notes that Alan Tudge, the minister, criticised the decision, despite the fact the campaign adopted the tactics of the industry lobbyists such as Gina Reinhardt, who made the connection between AEGN, Newcastle Uni affiliated members on the issue. And like Ross, she says she'd love to be involved in more advocacy like this. So I might just ask you about the cost of the ad and the logistics of making the ad happen. And apologies, Julie, you missed out. I think we were all on the phones pretty quick that week. But yeah, Sue, what did it cost, and what was the impact per dollar, do you reckon?
$4,000 plus GST. And I got your name down, Julie, on the next list of people to call. I was doing the whole thing from our daughters in Brisbane while nursing a newborn baby with one arm and on the phone with the other arm. Impact per dollar, within a few days, it was like, I reckon we've had higher impact per dollar than anything else we have ever done before. As we said, it's the national newspapers were looking at it as just a parochial issue. Yeah, who cares? Storm in a teacup. Bam, when that ad went out, I had the Financial Review on the phone, the ABC had us on the radio, the Herald, and then, of course, every news outlet picked it up, and suddenly it was across nationally, and they were talking about it. I want to, again, commend Jenny for the risk she's taken, the risk to us. So you'll get some grumpy little journalist at that pathetic broadsheet writing some petty little words about you, or some wannabe shock jocks on Sky TV. I mean, seriously, if the people and their friends who are in power doing these awful things around coal and climate change, and who are going against the judgment of the court, this is going to be catastrophic, and they're standing there and they're saying, I don't care. If they're not criticising you for what you're doing, then you're not having any effect. So it's on my KPIs from now on. And I promise I'll call you first next time, Julie.
And Julie, just on that point about Alan Tudge, yeah, there was pushback from the right saying that, Mark Vaile had been silenced. And just to be clear, no one on this call had any power at all over either the council or Mr. Vaile. He chose to resign rather than answer questions about his conflicts of interest, and rather than answer questions about the conflict between the university's stated strategy and him chairing a coal company. He could have stuck around. We didn't force him to quit, but he didn't want to answer any of those questions. So he did the dignified thing and left. So this idea that somehow anyone on this call, cancelled him or silenced him, no one had a louder voice than him. No one had better access to the media than him. And he chose to not use his voice. He chose to exit instead. Another question here. What next? If you're feeling emboldened, Sue or Alan, what next?
I'll jump in while Alan's thinking about that. I think, as we said at the beginning, we can't take a cookie cutter approach from now on. I think a big part about this was the element of surprise, that not the usual suspects. I really endorse what Alan said about business people stepping up. I think it'd be great if, as I've said from the beginning, I was interested because I've supported this thing, climate change, moving beyond coal, support for the Hunter region for so long. Something comes up, it's like, geez, we didn't see that coming. Have we got any other tools in our box as to what we can do? And, yes, so we thought of this thing and we did it. Does that mean next time anything happens, you just go and whack an ad in the paper and put your name on it? Well, it depends on the context. Like, what's the issue? What's the, geographical, cultural reach? What's going on? I think it'd be great for us to be able to get together and go, okay, what's the situation here? What could we do? What interventions can we make? And as Ross said, thinking ahead as well. What are some things we can work on in the long term that we can plan to speak up about? And what does that speaking up look like? Who does it? Where? In what forum? Which people do you need in the group to give you cover? Getting Mike Cannon-Brookes agreeing to sign on the second time around got us another headline, which was great. So luckily, we have networks. We're used to working together. We're used to organising one another, being organised, and we've built up trusting relationships, many of us, and happy to keep on talking about that and brainstorming ways we can amplify the work of the things that we've given money to and that we've invested in, that as philanthropists we can aim higher and do more without spending any more money, or hardly any, when it comes to paying for ads. But all the radio interviews, the interviews I do with newspapers, they're all free. I don't have to pay for any of them. And as impact investors, lobbying for changing accepted practice, as Alan said. It's going to enhance investments, but we know that none of us are doing that for personal financial gain, but to change things with climate, social practice, human rights, and so on.
Alan, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with Sue. I think that we've got to get smart, and you've been smart. This has been really smart, and it's been really effective. And it doesn't mean that you have to copy it again and again, as you say. The common feature is leverage and community. Like, the opportunity here is to build your database of people that you can ring, or even if you can robo-email them almost, like a group of people. Will you do this? Will you do that? And they sign up for a concept that says, we're happy to support these sorts of things if the following conditions are met. So then what you do is you almost industrialise the process. So you don't have to have Richard ringing, wondering whether I'm going to say yes. Richard knows I'm going to say yes. And he's going to ring me because he knows it's going to be an easy yes for most things. And that's what we need, is people who are going to say, it's going to be an easy yes if the following are met. You know what I mean? So that's number one. Number two, I think that we've got to look for points of leverage everywhere. One of the great initiatives is Zali Steggall and the whole push for more independence in Sydney and in New South Wales. I think that could have a huge impact on politics, and we should all be thinking about that. The other one is litigation. I was inspired to litigation by what happened with Donald Trump. He ran around saying that the election had been stolen and 70 million people believed him. And then he went to court 61 times and was defeated 60 out of 61 times because courts demand evidence. And so when this government says we're doing enough, technology, not taxes, and all the other rubbish they're coming about with, if you take them to court, that will actually rely on actual evidence. You can hold them to account because a court looks at the facts. If you look at the Finkelstein inquiry at the moment into Crown casinos in Melbourne. They've tried everything, but it hasn't worked because it's been a judicial process that's looked at the evidence and looked at the facts. So I suppose the generalised observation is we have to be smart. We have to look for leverage. Leverage is not always in an advertisement. Sometimes it's going to be in trying to help a local member get up. It might be supporting some litigation and a range of other things. So, you know, it's very exciting to think about all of those points of leverage, but just to spend a lot of our philanthropic money trying to fix the mess that's created by a set of rules and political system that keeps making more mess is not the answer.
Thank you. We haven't got a few more minutes, but we've got I just noticed we've got a special guest who I'm going to throw to in a minute. But before I do, there's a question here I think I might put to you, Jenny. It's from an anonymous attendee who says, whether we like it or not, the Liberals are in power, have a good chance of winning. Mark Vaile, whatever his shortcomings, has the ability to advocate for the uni in Canberra. By removing him, the uni's lost a potentially useful ally. What were the benefits of getting rid of him? Well, you work at the Newcastle uni. What do you think the benefits of not having Mark Vaile are?
Well, I think it means that you get friends with everybody else, which is always a good thing. And you're right, even though the Liberals might be in power, there's things that can be achieved, I guess, outside of the dominant political party. And that's what we're realising, I think, on this phone call, that you can actually be effective in policy and advocacy outside the political system. But my other thought was, and look, I don't know him as a person. I haven't met him. I don't know anything much about what he really stands for. All I know is what's on the public record. But from what I understand from colleagues of mine who are in Canberra and work in those circles, that not all of the relationships that we might think you would get from being aligned with a political person, you would definitely be assured of getting from that particular person. So I think I don't have the facts for that, but certainly subsequent to what happened, people have said to me, I'm not quite sure what we thought in Newcastle we were buying anyway in terms of a political relationship because of where the National Party stands and their political kind of power within the coalition. So I'm not a political person, I don't really know, but certainly what's happened since then is that members of other political parties have, in fact, even within the coalition, have also reached out. So I think we may be seeing a bit of a change in terms of the fact that not all the Nationals support digging up good farming land to make coal mines. I think this big group within the National Party, the farmers, that are getting much more organised about looking after their land as well. So I think it may have been okay to think that 5 years ago, but from what I'm hearing from political and other people that work there, that whole party basis of supporting coal is actually, we're starting to see a change in those alliances, and particularly within the Nationals. And I think also the tolerance of what the National Party has said to Indigenous people and women as well. I think that's a lot of that sort of on the nose as well. And some of those groups are actually becoming quite politically active and successful. So I hear that and I acknowledge it, but I think in retrospect, it's probably not as good as it sounded when it was sold to Newcastle. That's my own thoughts. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, it's about time to wrap up. Technology might get in the way of my last little attempt there, but look, thank you so much, Jenny. Like, literally, thank you so much. Again, the only reason I handed back my cheap trophy was because of you. And what you've heard today is the only reason all these other people did what they did was they thought, if you could put yourself out there like that, then what could they do? So thank you, not just for doing that, but for dedicating your life to these sorts of things that are so important to you, that you went into academia and you stuck to it, even when politics tried to get in the way. So thank you for that. Thank you to Sue and Alan for sharing yourselves with us today. And to Ross Knowles as well. It's an amazing thing what's just happened. And can I just say that no meetings were had in the making of this campaign, not one that I'm aware of. No Gantt charts were created that I ever saw. I mean this. Like, I think a lot of people think a campaign, whatever that means, requires some enormous infrastructure or overhead. Actually, what it needs is a good, simple idea and people that are willing to work towards it. So I mean it. You know, if I played any significant role, it was without a meeting and without a Gantt chart. I'm pretty confident Sue and Alan and Jenny are the same. It was just a bunch of people, as Sue said, who trusted each other, who had a common purpose, who worked together. And, you know, at Infrastructure Access Managers, our whole thing is we want to put mouths where the money is, and I'm really humbled by what we've seen today. It's wonderful, but it's a clear example that sometimes, you know, it's the mouth that matters more. So to Jenny, to Sue, to Alan, and to Ross, thank you all, and to all of our guests today, thanks for coming along. We'll email some stuff around afterwards. We'll let you know when the next one is. But yeah, have a good think amongst yourselves. Well, what else can I do? How do I use the leverage, as Alan said, to make a difference? It's not cookie cutter stuff, but you know, if you don't show up, you don't make an impact. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.